People are worried about our government. People are worried about democracy. People are worried about our whole system of voting and elections. We were the library that the people who wrote the Declaration of Independence used. We were the library that the people who wrote the Constitution used. We have a painting here that was commissioned by the library company at around the same time as Philadelphia was the capital of the United States. And the artist asked, do you want this painting to show history or knowledge presenting their gifts to the new nation? And the directors of the library company said, no, we don't want that. We want it to be a symbol of liberty, a woman representing liberty, presenting knowledge to freed slaves. The library company was founded by Ben Franklin in 1731, but before it was a library, it was a group of people who got together every week to learn from each other and to talk about the business of the day, news, but they also talked about history and philosophy. And over time, they began talking a lot about books. And so Franklin had the idea of, well, what if we all chipped in some money, bought books together, and then any member of the company could then borrow the books and return them. The connection between knowledge and freedom was explicit and really important. This became a place where people could learn about the cruelties and injustices of slavery beyond what they might be reading in newspapers. That isn't to say that there weren't slave owners among the early founders of the library company. Ben Franklin himself owned slaves. We had people on both sides of the issue. It was known at the time and important at the time as a knowledge resource for people who wanted to learn what was really going on with slavery. One of the greatest acts of violence perpetrated on African Americans in the slave trade, yes, there's the physical violence that we think of, but one of the greatest acts of violence was the tearing away of people from their history. The history that was taken from them was an incredibly rich history, deep in its own culture, deep in its own practices.
The first piece that I'll point out is a 1682 manuscript that's written in the ancient language of Geese on goatskin paper.
It's a beautiful item, and we use it in a lot of our publicity materials. It has not been displayed very often. An Ethiopian Coptic Christian manuscript. It has beautiful illustrations.
The one thing that I think is very important about this piece is that the colors are very vibrant, and it's in really good condition to be from the mid-1680s.
The pages are incredibly bright, the calligraphy is gorgeous on it, the illustrations are beautiful. It's an item that helps to remind people of the rich and important culture that Africans were taken from when they were brought to this country.
The other piece that is popular in this collection is the carte de visite of Sojourner Truth that she actually used in order for her to sell to raise funds for her abolition movement.
We were a place where abolitionist material and materials relating to the experience of African Americans were collected and shared. So we have these fantastic albums that are called friendship albums. They're albums that these middle-class African-American women kept. If you had someone visiting you, you'd have them leave a little poem or paint a picture as a way of a memento of their visit. And they would often be exchanged and mailed back and forth.
This one spans from like the 1830s, I believe, up into like the 1850s. It was owned by Amy Matilda Cassie, who was an abolitionist and a prominent African-American leader during the time and was important with the Philadelphia Anti-Slavery Society. And majority of the people in here were involved in the abolitionist movement. There are a lot of anti-slavery pieces in here. This particular piece was written by Frederick Douglass. William Lloyd Garrison, who was also an abolitionist of the time. His piece is actually one of the longest pieces in here. This piece here was done by Sarah Mapp Douglass.
Really prominent Philadelphian artist and also abolitionist. Despite every kind of racially oppressive thing that's going on in the United States in the 19th century, here she is drawing a flower. I think when people think about Black folk who lived, especially during the era of slavery, that everything that they represented was just about their oppression. And I'm like, but they were human beings. And so human beings also have to experience pleasure.
I think too about the cursive. They're using quill.
Yeah.
And to think about like having to dip it in ink
Right.
and then kind of very carefully
Not have
writing in.
splotches
Yeah,
of ink on the
yeah.
page, right?
So there are all these moments of pause that have to happen because of the forms of technology that they're using. You have to love your handwriting to have handwriting that beautiful.
Our responsibilities in being keepers of this collection extend beyond just keeping it safe and making it available to people. I think the library company has a very important role to play in getting people excited about being Americans, in getting people participating in the political process without being political, but in reminding people about where our country came from and what are its best principles that we now can use our role as citizens to try to get our country on track.